This is Music, and this is another episode of Songs from the Pukebox. Welcome to the second episode of a terribly titled What's Spinning series, Songs from the Pukebox. Now, the idea here is not so much to document everything I've listened to. It's more a matter of me picking out some things I've listened to and recommending them because I think some of you might like them. So, first up, I've listened extensively to Unseen World by Bandmate because I'm working on my Made of Steel series. And this is a great album. A lot of people say this is their heaviest album. And a lot of people say it's their best album. I really love this album for sure. It's heavy, it's groovy, it has some lots of metal parts. To my ears, it's a metal album. Has lots of metal parts to it, but also lots of funk, great vocal melodies. It's just a great album. If you like modern hard rock, female fronted, do yourself a favor and at least check it out and see if this is your thing. It's certainly my thing. What else have I listened to? I've been on a Coroner kick. So I gave R.I.P. a couple of spins. I gave Punishment for Decadence a couple of spins. Gave No More Color a couple of spins. Mental Vortex also got a couple of spins. And this is, for my money, really great technical thrash metal. And what's interesting is that the albums get increasingly technical and increasingly progressive as you listen through them. So absolutely great stuff, quality stuff. I did also listen to Grin here. And don't get me wrong, I like this album, but it's not my go-to album. It's on this album, I would say they're still kind of progressive, but they take their music in a more groove metal and more industrial metal oriented direction. And they don't have that many super fast parts like they have on the previous albums. So it's a good album. It's a very interesting album, but it's not my go-to Coroner album. My go-to Coroner album would be pretty much any one of the four other albums I showed you. I can't really pick one of those. Speaking of technical metal, I also gave this one here a couple of spins. So Destruction, Release from Agony. This is an OG picture disc from 1987, I think. And it sounds very good for a late 70s picture disc. I was really surprised the first time I gave it a spin. It sounded that good. But this is also technical thrash metal, some mind-boggling structures and guitar parts going on. So again, if you like tech thrash, check out Coroner and check out this one as well. The vocals might be a bit of an acquired taste. Schmear's vocals are very unique. And since this one was just standing next to it in my collection, I gave this one a spin too. Bestial Invasion of Hell. This sounds very, very different. This is raw, blackened, straightforward thrash. So if you like your blackened thrash, check out some early Destruction. So those were just the vinyls. CD-wise, I listened to this one here, Aeons Abyss, Terror Manifest. A great package actually, because I think one of them is a visual artist, so they pay a lot of attention to the visual aspect of their releases as well. This one came with a whole set of tarot cards. The tarot is the theme of this album. Musically, we're dealing with black death metal with a considerable doom metal injection, and also some thrash metal, and it's really, 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 really good. Very artistic as well. You have some kind of almost atmospheric sections. You have some black metal sections, some death metal sections. and the songs, you know, they're different from one another as well. So very, very cool stuff, very artistic stuff. You have some black metal screechy vocals, you have some death growls, very interesting compositions. The album as a whole is just very interesting, very artistic, as I said. So yeah, check out this one here if you are into kind of like artistic blackened death metal with some doom and thrash metal influences. Something completely different. I decided to go back and listen to this one. I listened to this a lot when it came out back in the 90s. David Bowie, Earthling. And this one is really interesting because this is David Bowie apparently having listened to The Prodigy. There seems to be quite an influence from The Prodigy on this album. It's a great album, actually. I really like all the songs on the album. It's a David Bowie album, don't get me wrong. It sounds like David Bowie. It is artistic. It is all that stuff. But there's just an influence from, you know, mid-90s electronic music in the vein of The Prodigy. Great stuff. I really like this album. I also went back and listened to these two here, the singles collections or compilations by Depeche Mode. I would listen to these a lot in the early 2000s. It was. I remember just driving around in my car on the highway at night, listening to these. Kind of a weird thing to do, but that's what I did back then. I like Depeche Mode. I'm a big fan of Depeche Mode. It just so happens that a lot of my favorite versions of their songs are their single versions. So it's really great that they're collected on these two compilations. Depeche Mode, really interesting. It's they started out being in kind of like upbeat electropop band, and they evolved into being a really, really dark kind of like electro pop meets rock band. They're, you know, on this one here has some really, really dark songs with some rock elements and really melancholic. You do of course have Just Can't Get Enough and all that fun stuff they did in the beginning, but it's like from See You, the fourth track, they start getting more and more melancholic, and I think it has to do with the departure. One of their members was ended up, I think, in Erasure, I think. But there was a member who left, and after that they took their music in a much darker direction. So lots of great hits on these two. I really enjoy listening to them. And if you want to get into Depeche Mode, I think this one is a great place to start, especially if you like dark, depressive music. And then you can go to this one afterwards. I do like sort of the cheesy 80s electropop songs in this one as well. So yeah, some Depeche Mode. From that, back to metal. Destroyer 666, Cold Steel for an Iron Age. Blackened thrash metal, just tasty, good Australian blackened thrash metal. Aeons Abyss, by the way, also Australian. Great stuff. Enjoyed listening to it. I always enjoy listening to this. If you like your blackened thrash metal, maybe with a bit of death metal influences, check out Destroyer 666. And then I decided to go back and listen to some Danish kind of hard rock. So DAD Draws a Circle, of the follow-up to Call of the Wild. Call of the Wild is kind of like cowpunk. On this album, that's a bit more like diverse in terms of, you know, different rock genres. There's a bit of the country cowpunk influence for sure on this album. But you also have Isn't That Wild? That's just an all-out punk song. You have Mighty Mighty High and God's Favorite. And There's a Ship. They are kind of like, almost like gospel-inspired hard rock. Very interesting. Maybe God's Favorite is more like a hard rock song. But Mighty Mighty High and There's a Ship, there's some gospel influence on those. You have Black Crickets, which is more of a dark, kind of like country-inspired song. I Won't Cut My Hair is a blues song. So some pretty good variation here. And while I was at it, I decided to listen to No Fuel Left for the Pilgrims. More accessible internationally because it was released on EMI, I think. This is 80s metal, 80s hard rock. Very good stuff. And it sounds like they're trying to also, do a bit of sleaze metal as well. But it just ends up being kind of weird, their sleaze metal. So Siamese Twin is about having sex with Siamese twins, and Girl Nation is, about being kidnapped by a nation of kind of like an Amazon kind of nation. So their sleaze songs are a bit weird, to be honest. But it's a good hard rock album. And the last track, Ill Will, is just an all-out heavy metal song, actually very heavy. Great stuff. And while I was at it, why not listen to Risking It All? The follow-up, this is not that metally. It's more like a hard rock album. It has some fun, kind of like almost uplifting kind of hard rock songs, like Bad Craziness, D-Law, Making Fun of Money as well, Rock and Rock Raider, Smart Boy Can't Tell Ya. So some just straight up hard rock songs, good. You also have some ballads on there, which are not bad, to be honest. Grow or Pay and Laugh and a Half, just some nice ballads, and they're not cheesy, in my opinion. They're not your average, typical cheesy glam metal power ballad that I despise. And there's also Down That Dusty Third World Road, which is a kind of a darker, I wouldn't say, maybe it's a bit bluesy, but not all out blues. So it's a pretty good hard rock album. And the last thing I'm going to show you is Rune, I guess, by Enslaved, a famous progressive black metal band. I don't think this is a black metal album, to be honest. It does have your, black metal bits. It does have your screechy black metal vocals, but it has so many other things going on. So to my ears, it's just like a progressive, very, very heavy rock album. It's very melodic, actually. It's very good. I really enjoy listening to it, to be honest. Great stuff. But I wouldn't consider this an all-out black metal album at all. I don't know where it stands in sort of the appreciation by Enslaved fans, but I really like this album myself. So Rune, it has a lot of influences from kind of like 90s alternative rock, I think, maybe even 70s rock as well, and some black metal for sure. So if you think that sounds interesting, give it a listen. I really like it. So that was my collection of some things I've listened to in the latter half of February. If you think some of this sounds interesting, by all means, check it out, give it a listen, see if you like it yourself. I can vouch for all of these recommendations for sure. Thanks for watching.